Bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Comment est-ce que comment vous vous sentez?
Well, now the work begins for Mark Carney, including working on relations with U.S. President Trump, who is not backing down on his talk of making Canada the 51st state. Earlier today, the two leaders speaking over the phone and agreed to meet in person soon. Now, during the campaign, Mark Carney made some big promises about restructuring the Canadian economy following his victory last night. We're getting reaction from business and industry about how they'd like to see those plans set in motion. And the CBC's Peter Armstrong is watching all of this. What are businesses looking for, Peter, in this new government?
Action, and they want to see this government get rolling, get moving. I think, look, they recognize we're still very firmly in the dust settling phase of this. But as you say, there were some pretty big promises made through this campaign. Promises that frankly had agreement from both of the major parties, if not all the parties in some cases, and businesses, business associations, industries, they've all got their various lists of priorities and things that need to get done and need to get done quickly. And near the top of almost all of them comes to what you said, that Mark Carney speaking with Donald Trump and addressing the situation with the United States, negotiating some kind of trade peace. But on top of that, they all feel there are a lot of opportunities here for this next government to step in and grow the economy domestically, take action here in Canada. Take a listen. We spoke earlier with Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada.
The harder part, the part that's actually probably keeping more people up is, as I said, what is Canada's long-term economic strategy? How are we going to strengthen our own country? Are we actually going to follow up and get rid of these interprovincial trade barriers? Will we do permitting in an expeditious way? Can we get our resources to market, from critical minerals to oil to gas to potash to uranium? The world wants what we have. Are we going to be able to strengthen this federation? Are we going to be able to do it in a fiscally responsible way?
Now, here is the upside to all of that, Ian. On the one hand, if they actually go ahead and do it, all things that Mark Carney has said he wants to do, that'll address a lot of the economic problems. But in the same vein, it can address a lot of his political problems as well. There's a whole vast tract of people that voted against giving this government a fourth term, that voted against Mark Carney and the Liberals, and are very concerned that the government isn't going to do what it has said that it will, and that it won't make good on its promises. Taking some action early and getting that ball rolling, doing the hard work on the ground of actually implementing some of those changes, that's going to go a long way to bringing in some political peace in a country that is, frankly, pretty divided right now.
So taking action early, how quickly do you think we're going to see change?
Look, I think, you've got to build in time for the government to get sworn in, a throne speech. We need a budget. We don't have a budget, and it's the end of April. But I think quickly, and remember, a lot of this is the government and all of us are in a bit of a race against time here. The Canadian economy has slowed considerably. It is expected to slow further as the trade war deepens and the tariffs really do begin to bite. And so there's a bit of a race here to try to get some traction, get some movement and some progress on all these files before Canada slips into a recession. And we're going to see those economic indicators. We're going to get GDP tomorrow morning. We're going to get jobs numbers next week. We want to be able to see some action that can at least portray that the government is doing something to try to get ahead of what we all know is the curve, the potential catastrophic nature of a trade war with the United States.
Hey, underneath that suit, do you have your Maple Leafs jersey? And as soon as this hits over, you're just going to change?
I had to turn the game off so I could talk to you. So, I'm here for you, Ian, but I'm going to go cheer for my guys.
All right, Peter, thanks.
Cheers.
So let's find out what the minority Liberal government will mean for Canada's auto industry, or at least what the expectations are from the industry of this newly mandated government. We're joined by Brian Kingston, president of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. He's in Ottawa. So, Liberal Party wins its fourth successive mandate in Canada, a minority government. How is the auto industry reacting?
Well, this is good news for the industry because we have been navigating one of the most turbulent periods of bilateral trade with the United States in the midst of an election. So now we have clear leadership. Prime Minister Carney has indicated that he will be engaging with the Americans right away and had a conversation with the president today. So we're hopeful that this will open the door to getting back to the negotiating table and finding a path forward. We have to work with the Americans in the auto industry. We're a totally integrated sector, and every day that passes is costing millions and millions of dollars.
But how to deal with Donald Trump is such a challenge. And in his victory speech, Mark Carney vowed to stand up to the United States and say Canada will only enter talks with Trump, quote, on our terms. Do you think he and Canada need to take kind of the offensive when fighting for Canadian workers?
Well, look, we've got to enter these negotiations with a strong hand and with some leverage, but we're very well positioned because we've just been through this with the Americans 5 years ago, a bruising negotiation to conclude the USMCA, or CUSMA as it's called in Canada. And we've got some of the best trade negotiators in the world at our Department of Global Affairs and Finance Canada. So we're in a good position. We've got to get to the table and just start the conversations. And this is costing the Americans. I mean, we are now estimating that US tariffs are going to cost the auto industry $108 billion US. So this isn't sustainable for the Americans. They need to get to the table. We need to get to a deal.
Last month, Carney promised $2 billion to protect the Canadian auto industry if elected. So he's been elected. What needs to be included in that plan?
Well, I think the most important thing is, before we start talking about finding ways to support the industry through this very problematic situation, we should look at what's in our own control, right? We can't control the outcome of a negotiation with President Trump, but what we can do is get rid of redundant trade barriers. So think about the federal EV sales mandate. It makes absolutely no sense. There's no way that the industry can achieve these targets and completely phase out ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, as quickly as the government is mandating. So let's look at these policies that make no sense. Let's get rid of them and position the industry for success. I think that will give us a stronger hand as we enter into discussions with the Americans.
At the beginning of the month, Carney put a 25% retaliatory tariff on cars and trucks made in the United States, and then made a commitment to, quote, use every dollar collected from that to support workers. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's the right move. What will happen over the coming weeks and months if we don't get to a quick resolution? It does become hard for production to continue. And just to give you an example, S&P is forecasting that North American automotive production could decline this year by almost 1 million units. So less production means less lines operational, less jobs, less vehicle sales, and ultimately less economic activity. So we do need to make sure that workers are supported, people that end up being laid off in the supply chain have those supports so that we can get through this period. But at the end of the day, supports will only take us so far. We have to get to an agreement with the Americans and return to duty-free trade in automotive across North America.
So for the first time, Carney elected as a member of parliament. He now has a mandate as the leader of a minority government. How are you feeling tonight about that new government and the prospect for what you're expecting to deal with these tariffs?
Well, it's always challenging to enter into a negotiation with the Americans. Obviously, in a minority context, it can make making concessions on really difficult issues just that much more challenging. That said, I think there was a clear message that Canadians sent. They want a leader who's in a position to negotiate with the U.S. and ultimately to protect our economy. So, I'm not going to pretend that this is going to be easy. There's going to be ups and downs, but I think everybody is committed to ensuring that the Canadian economy continues to thrive. Our auto sector, which employs 130,000 Canadians, continues to thrive, and that we ultimately come out of this stronger and better. So I think we're there, but it will be definitely a bit of a rough road in the coming weeks and months.
Brian, always nice talking to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brian Kingston is the president of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association.